When searching for trains, especially on a mainline piece of trackage, the radio is your best friend, except for when you think a train is approaching just to film the passing of a high rail truck. At the time, this shot would be nothing more than disappointing. However, for the next 2 days, we'd be filming trains all over the state, starting here in Bushnell, making it all the way to Jacksonville. The idea was to follow the S-Line north to Baldwin this evening, where we'd turn east towards Jacksonville to spend the night. So, with all reds at Bushnell, we'd move north to Wildwood. Since the S-Line improvements from around 2013, not too much has changed in Wildwood. A couple yard tracks were pulled up, the Y was abandoned, and spurs, now used for storage, is about it. However, in early 2022, CSX began renovating Old Wildwood, starting with its 1940s-era SAL passenger station. With new windows, air conditioning, paint, and ground-based facilities like lockers and a small kitchen, Wildwood is once again a base for crews and signal maintainers like the high rail that was seen at Bushnell. While traffic for the Wildwood area has increased over the years, the yard is still mainly used for block swapping, a practice introduced by Hunter Harrison's Precision Scheduled Railroading, or PSR for short. One of 4 trains that perform this duty at Wildwood daily is southbound M441, Waycross to Tampa mixed freight and general merchandise for Yeoman Yard. Today, 441 would have a pretty straightforward maneuver, dropping a cut of rock in the number 1 yard track and continuing south with no pickups. While I move south a few hundred feet, 441's conductor makes the cut and now rides the last car as the engineer backs the train into the yard.
You got it covered. Give me 20 at 3273. Another 20. 4 more, 4. 2 more times.
2 big GEs would be the power for this switching job, with SD40-2 number 8214 dead in tow, returning to Tampa after some routine maintenance in Waycross. 441 would have a mid-train DPU as well, but it would be disconnected from the lead engines for independent running. The dwarf signal guarding the yard lead is now showing an approach, giving 441 the freedom to head back to their train engines light, transferring from the yard to track 1.
We'll be good. We're going to hook up right there at it. Appreciate it. Thank God, so much.
While all this crossing over would wrap up, we'd move south about 1.5 miles between the signals at Wildwood and Turnpike. With a high yellow lit for 441, the signal would soon turn green as the JA dispatcher grants 441 trackage all the way south to Tampa.
Alright, M44122, go ahead, over.
Alright, set off complete, new numbers in the PTC, ready to blast off. Can you get us a bus order, please?
Absolutely, I'll do it right now for you guys. Alright guys, come on south, I'm ready for you.
Alright, here we go. Thank you much.
I guess dispatch out. Okay, Brian, thank you. Dispatch out.
Dinner would be our next objective as another southbound approached, calling as L743. By the twilight's last gleaming, 2 more GE wide caps would lug this train south, coming into Wildwood about 30 minutes after 441's departure, ironically to pick up the cut that 441 had just dropped off. L743's 8,000 feet of rock would soon become almost 10,000 feet as they made their pickup at the south end of the yard, while another train now lined on track 2 received signals through. That signal down there is called Moreland Park, where the north yard lead connects to the main line. That approach limited would be for a northbound who would be diverging onto the single main at Oxford at limited speed. The train in question would be I-044, nightly intermodal out of Tampa's Uceda Yard, and the train that we'd follow all the way north to its terminus in Jacksonville tonight. Driving north on US 301, a meet and crew swap would take place at Summerfield, the next siding north of Wildwood. Southbound I-045 and northbound counterpart I-044 would swap crews here, sending the Tampa crew back to Tampa and the Jacksonville crew back to Jax.
2028 JRS now showing us on the I-044 22, Bulletin 32694, call McBrady. Permission to pull from where we stand here on the main north. Yes, sir. Yeah, once you get your PTC up running, guys, okay to take off.
The 15-minute stop at Summerfield would give us enough time to pull into Ocala, where a high green would greet us for I-044, rounding the first corner of the Ocala S-curve that splits the town in two. An hour later, we'd be in Stark for our last shot of the train as it speeds north into the dark forests of North Florida.
I-044 3471 clear. Track 2 northbound.
Breaking off the chase here, we check into the hotel for some snacks and sleep, as an early start would be planned for the following morning. Departing the hotel at dawn, we'd hear of two trains meeting at Honeymoon Y, the first being M222 coming north off the Sanford sub and heading west to Baldwin on the SP line. We'd catch up to him at White House, and even though we'd never catch the power, we will see more of this train before the end of the day. Only minutes after 222's passing, the signal at North End White House upgrades from a white restricting aspect to a yellow approach, finally changing to a high green in about 10 minutes. White House is the only siding on the Jacksonville to Baldwin line, nicknamed the SP by rail fans. It's a popular siding for dispatchers to meet trains in, as it can fit many of the locals that run this line with ease. The signal here would be for CO42, the train that made us drive all the way out here in the first place, rolling towards Baldwin and the S-line after building his train in West Jack's yard. 0720, exactly 15 minutes after M222, CO42 comes into view, lugging his heavy train of loaded coal up the hill, led by 3 more GE motors. We knew that from here, the only other action would be around Baldwin, so we'd follow CO42 there after his slow start out of Jacksonville. 10 minutes later, and we're at CP East Baldwin, where M222 would be stopped on track 1, letting CO42 overtake them before entering the yard. With CO42 now out of the way, the dispatcher gives M222 an approach medium signal that will take him onto the Northeast Y, crossing him over from track 3 to back into Baldwin. A restricting signal at Baldwin Tower is all that's needed for M222's arrival into Baldwin, as he'd work with 2 locals and train M442 in the yard as all 4 manifests built their trains. We'd grab some snacks at a gas station and hit the road once again, as Baldwin would be blocked for another couple of hours. Following the Callahan sub north along 301, we'd stop next at the subdivision's namesake town, Callahan. Looking south from the Kings Road crossing towards the junction, good news would await us. A medium clear signal would be lit for a southbound freight, diverging off the Nahunna sub to the Callahan sub here to head towards Baldwin. In a couple minutes, our train would round the corner, calling us M441, a Central Florida staple, now only about 2 hours into its trip south to Tampa from Waycross. Hearing that our train of the day was nearing Crawford on the NS, we'd follow 441 south the 4 miles to the interlocking at Crawford, where the CSX Callahan sub crosses with the Norfolk Southern's GS&F main line at grade. As 441 passed, we could hear NS64Q calling in the distance, going through St. George about 9 miles west of Crawford. 64Q is not a very common train, running only once or twice a month, but usually with some interesting power. With ethanol loads from the Union Pacific in Chicago to Jacksonville and the FEC via Norfolk Southern, foreign power isn't uncommon. However, a mix of heritage and foreign power is, and what was about to happen on this occasion. Led by NS 1068, an SD70 Ace painted in the Erie Railroad's green and silver paint, UP 9096 would trail second, being another SD70 Ace, with an NS-9 as third and last in the consist. Here at Crawford, we'd meet a fellow railfan and Jacksonville native, Adam Finger, who would share the same interest as us on this train and would be our guide for the next half hour as we chase 64Q south. Meeting 64Q at Norris would be NS 330, daily freight for Macon off the FEC and Jax. Norris is the south end of the siding that begins at Crawford and is the only siding between Jacksonville and the Diamond. The meet would give us plenty of time to set up at Thomas Creek Road, a scenic crossing in the middle of the woods, where 64Q would be getting back up to speed using all 3 locomotives to do so. Another 10 miles and we're on the outskirts of Jacksonville, now at a spot called Birdville, a popular spot on the NS as the last grade crossing before Simpson Yard. Last stop would be Simpson, where 64Q would get some paperwork and drop off his EOT before continuing to the FEC across the St. Johns River in downtown Jacksonville. We'd break off the chase here as we heard a couple trains leaving Baldwin and a couple heading south, so we'd drive north again about 20 minutes to CP's Sandy Ford on the CSX. Sandy Ford is the last crossover on the 20-mile Baldwin to Callahan SM line. The yellow approach signal would be for a northbound calling as M442. With not much good light here, we'd move north a couple miles to Pony Road, where the signal bridge named Callahan Turnout was showing good news as well, displaying a medium clear signal aspect, meaning 442 was lined through the junction, diverging onto the Nahunna sub towards Folkestone and Waycross. In a few minutes, 442's headlights would crest the hill, rolling north over the hill with two locomotives, one up front and one as a mid-train DPU. I had heard about 442 earlier in the day, and I wanted to catch it, as it used to be one of the most reliable daylight trains in Central Florida only a few years ago. Around 2018, this train would be leaving Tampa as Q652 around 7 or 8 a.m. every morning, switching to an afternoon run around the end of 2019. After 2020 and the many changes that came with it, 442 became an evening run, leaving Tampa around 6 p.m. Since then, crew times have been pushed back to past midnight, putting this train's usual departure time around 1 in the morning. For that reason, I haven't seen this train in over a year, making it a nice catch on this cool September day. Meeting this 442 at Dial Hill would be a southbound, so we'd set up around the corner at Callahan, where the double-track Nahunna sub splits off to Baldwin, creating the Callahan sub, which had switches bent for a crossover maneuver. The dispatcher had lined through the southbound, telling us whatever was coming was going towards Baldwin. M203 would end up being our southbound, Louisville, Kentucky to Baldwin autoracks, destined anywhere from downtown Jax to Palm Center or Tampa in the center of the state. With 203 now out of the way, we'd drive north another 15 minutes to Dial Hill, where we knew of two more trains heading our way. At Dial Road, the Nahunna sub coming north out of Callahan crosses with a set of ABS signals protecting a defect detector known as Singly, located at milepost A619.5. Here at Dial Hill is by far one of the most relaxing settings to railfan in, with the calm of the afternoon and the landscape quiet in the September breeze. Because of this silence, I could hear the horn of M457's lead motor from miles away as he crested the hill southbound towards us. In a few minutes, the signals would light up, with crossing gates following moments later. With freight for Orlando and surrounding areas, M457 is a noontime usual on the Florida funnel, meeting a northbound at Callahan as the dispatcher uses the double-track portion to its full potential. The passing of 457's final auto rack would guarantee the approach of another train with a high green lit on track 2 for northbound IO32, coming off the Callahan sub from Baldwin at the junction. IO32 is an interesting train out of Jacksonville, as it not only hauls priority intermodal, but also Tropicana traffic from Bradenton, now taken north most nights on train IO44, the intermodal we chased the night prior up the S-line. In fact, 6 of the 10 reefers on today's IO32 would come off that IO44 as we filmed these cars for the second day in a row. IO32's 10,000 feet of New Jersey-bound traffic would end the lunchtime parade, so we'd move back south to Callahan, where the old 1911-built depot still stands, now as a visitor center and the museum for the sleepy town. Callahan first found itself on a timetable in 1861 when the Florida Railroad laid tracks through town, building the original depot just 100 yards away from where we are now. A call of the signal at Dial Hill from another southbound would send us south to the distant to Callahan signals on the Nahana sub, about 2 miles south of the junction. I wanted to try this spot with this southbound as I knew it was IO25 who would be using every bit of the 60-mile-per-hour track speed. 2 minutes pass and the headlight appears of 12,000 feet of Chicago intermodal for the Florida Peninsula, now only 11 miles away from Jacksonville's Duval Yard, where it terminates. About halfway through the Speedy passing of IO25, I'd hear some chatter on the radio and a signal call out at Crawford. A northbound was clearing the interlocking 4 miles south of Callahan, which was 3 miles away from us. So with the end of IO25 now clearing us, we jump back into the car and roll north again, meeting our train at the junction with about 15 seconds to spare. Minutes pass and the hits keep on coming. Back at Pony Road, we'd once again be greeted by a limited clear signal on track 1 for another train at Callahan, this one being the counterpart to IO25, northbound IO26. 3 more GE wide cabs would bring up this train from Baldwin after traveling west on the SP line out of Jack's Ramp. Because the NS and CSX cross in the woods along the north lead of Duval Yard, where this train originates, curfews are made for each railroad for when they can get access to the diamond. In the afternoon, it's all NS, forcing trains like IO32 and IO26 out of Jax the back way via Duval Connection and that same SP line we followed CO42 along this morning. IO26 would wrap up our northbound parade, so we'd grab an afternoon snack in Callahan and relocate south towards Baldwin. 20 minutes pass and we're set up at a little back road right around the corner from CP to Houma.
2 has cleared to Houma. Track 3, lead engine 998 south.
Passing that control point now would be the strangest train of the day, L743. Today's train would consist of 104 rock loads led by 2 GE wide cabs, both long hood forward. From Brown Sand all the way to Baldwin, crews would have to deal with this odd consist, finally spun at Baldwin for the Lakeland crew to take south to Winston, short hood forward, the normal way. Three miles south and 10 minutes later we'd be at Bryceville, where a common afternoon traffic jam was building, as trains blocked both entrances to Baldwin. In front of L743 would be that M203 from earlier, both on track 3. Line through on track 1 would be our final train of interest, symboled B631, ethanol loads off the CP in Chicago for Tampa.
B631-19, clear Bryceville, number 1 track working southbound CSXT 7036, no defect.
Because of this train's routing south, the Tampa crew gets on at Waycross to take the train down the S-line, about a 7-hour journey. The Tampa crew is driven all the way up to Waycross just for this move, making it a no doubt about it train rolling through Baldwin today, passing 4 stop trains in order to clear the line. 2 CSX units would lead the train, replacing a duo of CP and NS motors that originally were on this guy out of Chicago. But for CSX power, a rebuilt CM44 and SD70 would do just fine today. There would be a third engine on this train, located at the end, as the DPU. A Kansas City Southern SD78 would stay on the train heading south, making for an interesting sight, yet foreign power nonetheless. Through Baldwin, we'd jump ahead of the train, pulling off at Lottie for our next shot. The train wouldn't be doing all of the posted 60-mile-per-hour speed limit, and I don't blame them, as Lottie is known for their 45-mile-per-hour speed limit in town, enforced strictly by, let's just say, not very busy cops. In our 15 minutes of waiting for this train, there were 2 traffic stops, resulting in 2 tickets. Into Waldo, and once again ahead of the train by a few minutes, I'd set up next to the short spur track that breaks out of the S-line here that used to run down to Gainesville, connecting Brooksville and Dunellen to the main line to Baldwin. On this very north end of our local rails, 2 maintenance of way machines would be stored, making for an interesting shot as 631 barrels south.
CSX beat 231, 16, we have cleared south in Wildwood. We're headed south, CSX 70, 36 south. Beat 631.19, no defect, clear on the north end of Hawthorne, southbound on CSX 70, 36 south.
Driving south down 301, we could hear the crew of 631 right next to us calling signals town through town. Thankfully, our speed limit is about 20 miles per hour faster than theirs in some spots, giving us one more chance to catch the train at beautiful Lake Lochloosa, where the evening light was perfect. With 631 rolling south, we'd break off the chase here to intercept I-75 at Ocala to head home before the evening traffic set in. So I thank all of you who tuned in for this one. I hope you enjoyed and perhaps learned a thing or two about Jacksonville and surrounding areas. But until we meet again somewhere trackside, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.